Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review People You May Know 2017. So, this movie, I really honestly just enjoy this movie just because of its out of the box kind of thinking. Really, we have a guy that is to have a job of being a photo editor or a person that is really good at like Photoshop and stuff like that, where you have this guy who is to try and readjust a lot of photos that are to be put out for magazines or I think he's kind of like a freelance kind of guy. And so we have this guy who is to just kind of do a lot of photo editing for fun. But then we also have Jed, who is the main character here, who is also to just do some photo editing just for fun, just to be able to have fun with it. And he is to end up putting it in his private folder because he doesn't actually have a social media account whatsoever. He doesn't have a Facebook, a Snapchat, an Instagram, or whatever. And so we go into this movie to eventually find out how Jed is all of a sudden going to become a nobody who is to just go on Facebook to eventually be a man that has seemingly millions upon millions of followers because of photos. Because it seems like this guy is living a very extravagant life. And even to the point of him having a photo where he is at a casino with Usher. And I'm like, well, who is there taking the photo? And did it just so happen to be somebody nabbed this up and Jed found the photo later on and he was there? No. We have Jed who just likes to have fun with his photos, and eventually he realizes that after he is to do this, that eventually he is to have a lucrative opportunity afterwards. So we have Jed who is to be this guy that eventually has to learn how social media works, but then also he has to eventually learn how to, I guess, manipulate it. And I think that's kind of a very interesting approach. If anybody would remember the black and white film A Face in the Crowd, the Andy Griffith movie, that kind of feels kind of very similar to what's going on in this movie, where we have Andy Griffith's character who is mentioning that he's an influencer and stuff like that, to where this movie kind of goes into that similar approach of having somebody who all of a sudden has so many subscriptions on a social media platform like Facebook that eventually he is to market and advertise things and eventually get expensive clothes for free. And eventually also he is to eventually meet a man that he was supposedly in a photo with. And we are to see what is to happen when eventually that comes upon this movie. We also have Jed, who is also to try and use his influence to try to also help a number of his friends. And because eventually we have Jed somewhere in this movie go into his class reunion. We also have some of his closest friends or family members of Jed kind of just very surprised by his social media presence and how it seems that his photos are very so unbelievable to what his life is really like. But eventually, once Jed is to seemingly pretend that he is to have a social life, eventually that social life does actually pick up. And eventually Jed is actually going out to clubs and parties and living the high life. Actually going and really, really being involved with the people that he had faked uh, having photos with at some point in time. Going into this movie, I just thought it was interesting. I thought it was also just uh, really it was just an interesting film. So let's get into spoilers of this movie because I've talked for 5 minutes already. So I think it's about that coveted time to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So people you may know. So we have Jed, who is to, like I said, he is to consistently be at his computer adjusting photos uh, for magazines and kind of oddball projects, freelancing, of course. We have him eventually getting a phone call from one of his people that he is to edit a photo for, and so Jed does so, and eventually Jed is to try and ask this woman who had asked him to edit his photos, like, hey, like, are you busy? Are you free tonight? Like, do you want to go out for a drink? For him to hear no answer. So, yeah, Jed's living the high life. So, Jed is to uh, edit these photos to go out for a magazine, but also he is to go and eventually just start to practice consistently, taking photos of himself and just adding them kind of randomly into frame. And like he is just kind of having fun with it. He puts it in his personal file for no one to ever to be see it, just as a joke, just for something fun to do. So Jed is to eventually go onto a uh, a party for his best friend and his husband. So we have Jed who is going to this, I guess, pre-wedding uh, party with his best friend Will, who is getting married to his husband. And so we have their father doing a toast, and so we eventually have Jed, I believe, at this party going and meeting some girl who is to mention, yeah, like, I desperately, if I'm going to meet a man, I want to thoroughly Google him before I even think to go out with him. Like, I really want to dig down deep and search all of his social medias to know every single thing about him. And Jed's like, well, that's kind of interesting. Like, if anything, I don't have any social medias. And that's where this girl's like, yeah. So, pretty much after this party, Jed just gets inspired not to track this woman down or anything like suspicious. Jed just like starts to go like, well, I guess since everybody's doing this whole social media thing, so I guess I'll just hop on Facebook and just start an account. So we we have Jed who is going and like starting up a Facebook account, and so we have to have him use some photo of himself, and he's kind of like, like, should I go through my personal photos to kind of see what I can use? But eventually Jed is to eventually, I guess, make some photos specifically just for his Facebook account. And eventually, some of these photos are, of course, him being photoshopped in just for fun. And so, all of a sudden, bizarrely, we start having Jed that has a pretty okay following at some point because eventually people start to see photos of Jed with Usher at this casino somewhere. And so all of a sudden, people start heavily just really connecting to that photo, and is like, who is this Jed fellow? And so we all of a sudden have Jed, who is eventually just going through his day-to-day activities. We have Jed, who is to meet this girl named Tasha. It seems that when Jed is to go to this coffee spot, we have Jed know exactly how Tasha wants her coffee. We have Ted, who gives Tasha her sugar for her coffee, knowing full well he knows exactly how she likes it. And Tasha is like, how did you know how I like my coffee, sir? And so Jed is like, well, because you've been in here numerous times, and so have I. And so I've seen every single time that you like your coffee with sugar. And he also mentions that her name is Tasha. And Tasha's like, well, how do you know that my name is Tasha? And Jed is like, well, because your cup says that, unless your name is the company that we're like, unless your name is like basically Starbucks, which is not. Uh, so, but that's not this spot. So we have Tasha, who is to eventually leave because she is to, I guess, be late for work. And we have Jed, who's like, well, hey, like, if anything, like, considering we, like, keep coming here, like, maybe I'll just, like, add you on Facebook, and, like, I'll find you and whatever, and, like, I'll add you, because I just so happen to be, like, on Facebook. And so Tasha's like, oh, yeah, sure, whatever you want. And so we have Tasha, who is to go to her job, and we are to find out that she is an influencer of an influencer. What this person is to do is to have her company try to get big, huge celebrities and try to help them figure out how to monetize their Facebooks, their Snapchats, their Instagrams, their whatever, because they are heavy hitter influencers. The problem with this company is they are at a very low level of influencers, because we have Tasha's boss, who is named Oakley, who is to mention, it's like, you know what, I'm so sick of these like C-level YouTubers and these just bottom of the rung like celebrities that we're having to try and force to have them be able to help us out marketing wise. So if anything, like, Oakley is desperately wanting to be able to have a big grab like Gosling, or a fairly high leveled celebrity, and she's just tired of going through these smaller rungs of things. And so we have Tasha coming up with the idea, well, what if instead of trying to get like this big fish, how about we take a small fish and make him a big fish? Like, how about we find somebody in the middle of nowhere, and we all of a sudden figure out how this guy, in the best way possible, could become this giant celebrity on some platform. Like, have some random person that is on some Facebook, Instagram, whatever, find them, like a Hank or whoever that bizarrish guy that they named, that is one of Tasha's coworkers, that have some random guy be this gigantic influencer, this guy out of nowhere. And so we all of a sudden have Tasha, who is to eventually look at her Facebook and get a notification that Jed had eventually added her on to Facebook. And so we have Tasha, who is looking through Jed's profile, and she is seeing some really interesting photos. Like, this guy has, like, I guess, gone and done any number of adventuring, and Count Milikanjaro, or whatever freaking Mount Everest. I'm sure he's done any number of things to seem like he's some kind of backpacker or adventurer or whichever. And so we have Tasha, who is just kind of like, okay, like, who is this cat? So we have Tasha eventually going to the coffee spot the very next day to eventually say, oh, hey, Jed, like, could I talk to you for a second? And so Jed is like, okay, this is weird. Like, I've never had a woman approach me kind of before. So we have Jed and we have Tasha. And so we have Tasha mentioning, hey, you know what? Like, I really loved the photo that you had on your Facebook with you and Usher. Like, where was that at? Like, what year was that? What year was that photo taken? And so we had Jed, who is making up this time and this day, and we have Tasha going like, well, like, those dates doesn't seem right because I know exactly when that photo was taken, and you weren't in it. But hey, like, I appreciate, like, you, like, taking the time and trying to edit these photos. Hey, like, if anything, like, how exactly are you doing that? Because that, like, what you're doing just looks amazing. And so we have Jed, who goes and is to shoot Tasha and to eventually easily put her in some magazine ad with a bottle of cologne next to her. And Tasha's like, wow, that looks amazing. And so we have Tasha, who is to bring to Jed this whole idea, and she is to eventually tell him exactly how to play this. That really, that there are certain kind of people that are involved in certain kind of apps. And so really, Ted should try to have a or Jed should have a bulk of his concentration on Facebook, and eventually he will tailor off into other apps, other social medias, eventually like Snapchats and stuff like that. So, like, little small videos or little small like photos, like consistently posting things to keep people interested and keep them intrigued. So we have Jed that is consistently posting these things, eventually to the point of him being able to do this so well that eventually he is to get a high-end, expensive clothes absolutely for free when he is to go to this party and hashtag it, and or he mistakenly does not hashtag it, but then eventually he hashtags it later, so that way he can eventually get these clothes for free. So we have Jed, who is to go to this club with with eventually realizing that Usher is actually inside of this club. And so Jed is like, oh my god, Usher is in this club, and more than likely he probably was able to have seen the photo of me there at the casino because it has 1,000,000 likes. Oh my god. Is Usher going to confront me about it? Is he going to be angry? What's going to happen? So Usher starts walking up to Jed and is like, hey, casino guy, huh? Like, you know what? I was actually just so, like, drunk, honestly, during that whole day of being at that casino. Like, I don't remember a thing. And Jed is like, oh my god, so I'm not dead. And so Usher is like, hey, man, like, how about you and me, like, take a photo together? Now, both of us being sober and we know what the heck happened. And so we have Usher going and taking a photo with Jed, hashtagging it like sober, and so we have eventually just Jed, who is all of a sudden just talking to Usher, and eventually this is to lead to have uh, Jed, who is mentioning to Usher, well, hey, like, if you're ever busy or if you're ever in town, like, how about we just hang out once? Like, would that be fine? And Usher is like, well, yeah, sure. Hey, give me your number, man. And so all of a sudden, like, this is just a storm of ruin. And we all of a sudden have Jed, who is, in some way or another, friends with Usher. And so we have Jed's best friend, who is named Will, who is just godsmacked about all this. Like, oh my god, like, you are friends technically with Usher. Like, you and him, like, going out, what is your life like now? So we push on to have Jed eventually go to this school reunion, and eventually we have some people there that are to give Jed crap about like really, like, you like doing this well, and so we all of a sudden have this girl who is named Frankie. It seems that she is doing amazingly well in a lot of her plays that she's doing. She's involved in theater, and we eventually have a lot of people who is to tell Frankie that, you know what, you need to go and like reach for the stars. Like, you need to like go on and do something bigger. And Frankie is like, yeah, that sounds great and all, but we find that Frankie is actually married to a man, and if that could happen, yeah, I'm sure. I think his name is Philip. I want to say his name is Philip because I can't see the actual picture of the guy. Yeah, Philip. There we go. We have Frankie who is married to Philip, and so it seems that Philip's most thing that he wants is to have Frankie be pregnant with a child. Like, that's all that really Frankie is caring about right now. Evidently, Frankie is a teacher of some kind, and so really, it's either wanting a baby or him doing his teacherly duties. And so we have eventually who or we eventually see that it seems that Frankie is really just kind of going through the motions of things and kind of doing whatever Philip wants, and Frankie isn't really striving to get any of her dreams fulfilled or excelling her career anywhere. Of like, she's just kind of got to a glass ceiling point in her life. And so we have Jed, who is to show up at this class reunion, and Frankie is actually at this class reunion as well. So we have Jed, who has a connection with Frankie. Evidently, both Frankie and Jed uh, had been dating at some point. They had gone to prom together, and we have Jed who confronts Frankie to just kind of catch up on things, to see where her life is. It doesn't seem that at any point in all Frankie is to mention to Jed that she is married. It seems like she tries to skirt around it. Or she just tries to say, like, well, yeah, I'm acting right now, and that seems to be where my focus is. And we have Jed who's like, well, hey, like, he's kind of like the Tobey Maguire from Spider-Man moment when Tobey Maguire is finally to talk to Kristen Dunst's character in Spider-Man, where Jed is like, well, like, yeah, you were really good in all of the plays. It's like, if anything, like, you should be really going somewhere with your career. And so we eventually have uh, Ted, who is to have this night with Frankie. And so we, of course, have Jed, who is to friend Frankie on Facebook. And so we have just Jed, who is consistently just kind of looking at certain photos of Frankie and really just kind of like seeing her and whatever she's doing. And evidently her like relationship status is a non-existent thing on Facebook. So we have eventually Jed, who's deciding, you know what, I'm going to do a good thing for my friend. Like, I'm going to go, and since I'm an influencer, and since, like, Frankie was really nice to me, like, I'm going to go and try to get her a bigger gig somewhere. Like, I'm going to try and get her uh, help. And so we have Jed, who is starting this hashtag to try and get Frankie a better job, trying to see like anybody who can help her out. To where eventually Jed does get a response that it seems that people are interested in hiring this girl who is Frankie. And so we have Frankie who gets this notification on her Facebook, and we have Frankie who goes to Jed and calls him on the phone. It's like, hey, did you help me get like a job somewhere? like I didn't know that you were trying to help me out. And so we have Frankie who is to forcibly have to one do this audition, but we have Frankie who has to break the news to her husband that she's like, hey, like my career is going to explode right now. And so we have Frankie who's severely hesitant about talking to Philip about this whole thing. So we have Frankie going to Philip, and so we have Frankie who is to tell Philip about this audition and where it's located, and Philip is like, well, yeah, but you're probably going to have a baby sometime soon, so how is that going to work? That seems bananas. And so Frankie is like, well, yeah, about that kind of thing. So we eventually have like Philip, who's kind of very selfish, and like all he cares really about is just his needs, and that if Frankie is not going to meet all of Philip's needs, Philip is just going to dump Frankie. Even though they're married, even though they're whatever, he is like, well, like, you know what, like if you're not going to be here to have my baby and all kinds of things, like maybe I should go and find another woman who is interested enough in doing that for me. So Philip is to eventually break up with Frankie. And so we have Jed who is to talk to Tasha. And really, when Tasha is to start seeing that Jed is trying to help his friend named Frankie, we have Tasha who is starting to get jealous because Tasha thought that Jed could be hers, and eventually she will push him to eventually go that route. So we have Tasha uh, who is to do like a computer kind of phone call uh, with uh, with Jed. It's to be seemingly like a Zoom or whatever kind of but it like seems like it's like on the it doesn't matter. So we have Tasha who is to talk to Jed and say, yeah, Jed, like, I know you're putting, like, all your eggs in one basket with this Frankie character, but I was just so happened to looking through her photos, and I ended up finding a wedding picture, and so maybe Frankie isn't telling you the entire truth about everything. And then Jed is eventually getting emailed that photo that Tasha was to spot, and Jed is just now crushed. So Jed is to start to distance himself from Frankie, and Jed is to try to want to just be alone. We have Jed who is going and doing some VR with his best friend, and eventually kind of asking him, it's like, dude, do you watch like adult films on this? And like, what do you use this for? And Will is like, no, like I do video games on this. Like, if anything, plus also like my search history has to be really very vague, or otherwise my husband will like throw me out, kind of thing. So we we have Jed who wants to be alone and is to just want to just sleep in his apartment, and Will shows up at his apartment later on, and we have Will who's like desperately wanting Jed to go out somewhere, clubbing, something. Like he has to do something for like his uh social media influence anyways, so they might as well go out somewhere. And so all of a sudden, perfectly timed, we all of a sudden have Usher who is calling Jed. And so Jed really has no interest in answering Usher's phone. And so Will is like, dude, Usher is calling you, and you have zero donut holes worth of anything interest in talking to Usher? Are you insane? But so Jed doesn't want to answer the phone, and Will answers the phone for him. And so all of a sudden, we are now having Jed forced to have to answer the phone of Usher. And so we have Usher who is interested in going out clubbing, and so he immediately thinks, well, Jed, you're my guy tonight. And so we have Jed who goes out with Usher, and they have a night out on the town. They drink numerous shots. They get drunk as F, to the point to where really Jed is to drag Will into his apartment, and this guy is to almost be like blackout drunk. That's how bad it is. And Jed eventually is to go in front of his computer and continue to drink, because I guess the bar might have had way too expensive amounts of shots, but I guess luckily Usher was probably hitting the tab. So, because Usher probably said, hey guys, club tonight? So, we have Jed that is to go and do a photo with both him and Tasha in it, where Jed is to have been so blitzed that he is to still try and do this photo for his social media, and he is to do it where Tasha is in the photo with him, and Jed is having his arms around Tasha, and Tasha is to have his back to him. And so and it's in like a full white background. And so Jed just sends this photo out into the social medias. We have Jed who is to fall asleep and wake up the very next day realizing that this photo was sent out incomplete. That there is a part of his arm that is missing, because all it took was one small click and the photo would have been fine. There was some layer that he missed. But we all of a sudden have his social media go crazy. Mention how like there's a lot of these photos that look doctored, look fake, look whatever. And so we all of a sudden have a number of people coming out of the woodwork. We all of a sudden have one person who is to find this photo and say, hey, that looks familiar. I took one of these photos before. I want to go and sue this guy because he had doctored one of my photos. And so I'm like, okay, like, if anything, like, I guess since this guy was to make money off of just a photo in all technicality, that that is a good reason why this person is going to have all the good reason to go after this person. And so we have Tasha, who is going and knocking on Jed's door, and she's like, what the F? What is going on? And so we have Jed, who's explaining to Tasha, well, you know what? Like, I was so drunk last night, I just was trying to edit some photos, and guess what? An accident happened. It was just a matter of time for something like that to happen, and it does. So what? So we have Tasha, who's like coming up with all the stuff that's going to happen to Jed, and they are trying to figure out some kind of way of figuring out how to have this all work out, and they can't come up with an answer. And Jed is like, you know what? Just let it go. Just let it all happen. Whatever happens, happens. But like, at least like we did this, we tried. It was fun, but I guess now it's just done. So we have eventually Tasha, who is just like, well, yeah, I guess like a lot of this is all just done. But Tasha did like the fact that Jed had her in his photo. Like, she really appreciated it. Appreciated it so much that she ended up kissing him, and they start to take their clothes off, and Jed all of a sudden comes up with this bright idea that the way to quite possibly get over the molehill of all these problems is to eventually, by supposed accident, release out a sex tape of them doing it. Like, we have Jed, who is to mention, like, yeah, at some points in time they're going to look at the camera to know that it's there, and I guess just release this by accident, which wasn't actually the case. We have Tasha, who's like, oh my god, like, you're a monster. And so she ends up running off, and Jed realizes that he had hurt a friend's feelings and did not realize it. So we eventually have Jed, who is talking to some friends of hers. Frankie is to talk to one of her friends, Abigail, that is to uh, be one of these workers at this new spot that Frankie is in. And so Abigail eventually talks to Frankie, and she is to mention, it's like, well, hey, like, if this guy went out of his way to create this kind of life for himself, then man, that was a lot of work to do that. Like, if anything, like, there's a lot of times where there are lies or fake things that people tend to make up about themselves, and Abigail mentions that, well, hey, like, maybe I'm not actually Australian. And like, we have Abigail, who is talking into an American accent, and we have Frankie, who's like, oh my god, you're not actually Australian? And then Abigail's like, no, but wasn't that a horrible American accent? And so eventually we have Frankie, who has to come to terms with uh, what he had done on his social medias, to eventually try to turn it around and just say, well, you know what? Like, I did lie about my life, and so on and so forth. These photos are fabricated. Truthful Tuesday. Hashtag Truthful Tuesday. All of a sudden, we are starting to see a bunch of Jed's friends go on and just be like, well, yeah, like, here's the bad thing that I did. Like, we have Tasha admit that she had manipulated Jed into doing what he was doing, Truthful Tuesday. We have Will, who is to confess something about him. We are to have Will's boyfriend confess something about him. And this all gets to eventually also Jed uh, mentioning about how he got to re-meet up with Frankie, and how like great it was to see her again since all this time has passed. Where we have Frankie and Abigail noticing this, and Abigail's like, "Wow, that seems like romantic as heck." And so eventually Frankie is to mention her Truthful Tuesday. And so this all just starts to turn around because this thing just starts snowballing. And so all of a sudden Usher does his Truthful Tuesday, mentioning about like that not everything that you see is true, and all this kind of in general stuff. And then he just hashtags Truthful Tuesday. So this thing is just bizarrely just going everywhere, where it's probably not even Tuesday, but people are just saying, well, Truthful Tuesday, because it's probably Tuesday somewhere. So like, in especially any number of any countries, like it could be Tuesday there, where it's probably Friday here, or whichever, whatever the case may be. Not accurately saying what time zones are everywhere or when this video is going to go out, but so yeah, that's just the way that this movie just kind of tapers off as this whole Truthful Tuesday thing. And we have Jed, who is almost just kind of tempted to just go and just deactivate his Facebook. And all of a sudden, he is to get a message from Frankie. And so Jed is like, well, yeah, I guess I won't deactivate my account. Like, I guess I will talk to Frankie. And so that's when all of a sudden we are to see this movie end on I guess, a happy ending that kind of leaves some mystery afoot. But with that said, I am going to get out of here. This was a fun movie. I really enjoy it. It's a simple movie, but yeah, it's just like one of those where you have a guy that's a nobody that becomes a somebody, and that I think is the most important thing of this film. Is you have like a Tim Allen movie called Joe Somebody, where he goes and he is to fight one of his coworkers, and everybody is excited about this fight, making Tim Allen's character a way more popular guy in this job that he's in. And so this is almost kind of the same kind of vein. Is eventually there was somebody that didn't have a life, but all of a sudden this social media thing just took off, and all of a sudden he's having bottles and shots and stuff with Usher, and he's going out in clubs, and he is having the time of his life. So with that said, I am going to have the time of my life to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.